Okay, there it is.
Are we now on?
Yes, we are now live on YouTube, Professor Charles.
All right. To officially begin our webinar on future cities as cultural landscape, allow me to introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Alessio Russo is a senior lecturer and academic course leader in the Master of Landscape Architecture at the University of Gloucestershire, Cheltenham, United Kingdom. Before joining the University of Gloucestershire, he worked in Russia as an associate professor at RUDN University in Moscow and professor and head of laboratory of urban and landscape design at Far Eastern Federal University in Vladivostok. He is a member of the International Scientific Committee on Cultural Landscapes, or IFLA, International Federation of Landscape Architects Advisory Circle, and International Union for Conservation of Nature Commission on Ecosystems Management. He is on the editorial board of the Urban Planning Journal, a guest editor for several special issues, and an associate editor for the Journal of Urban Agriculture and Regional Food Systems. Outside of academia, Dr. Russo has worked as a landscape architect in the United Kingdom, Italy, and the United Arab Emirates, dealing with sustainable design and planning. Without further ado, joining us today, I give you Dr. Alessio Russo.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure. Maybe next time I will be in your university. And I've been to the Philippines, but I work with the Filipinos. So thank you again for inviting me. So today I will talk about future cities as cultural landscapes. But first, let me talk a little bit about my university, because the majority of people, they don't know where is the University of Gloucestershire, where is Cheltenham. So in landscape architecture, we are the oldest established accredited landscape architecture program in the UK, with almost 60 years of continuous landscape education. So next year we will celebrate 60 years in landscape architecture continuous education. Future cities. Yesterday I was looking for future cities on Google. So Google Images, we see just these images. So what do you think looking at these images? So moderator, can receive some comments from people that are live. What do you think? Do we have some comments? So what do you think about future city? Look at these
We
images.
can ask our students to post in the chat box.
Yes.
So far, we have no comments from our students.
Come on. At least at least I want one comment. Even if it's negative, positive comment.
Can you please repeat the question, Doctor?
So what do you think looking at these images online? You know, I Google future cities. What do you think? It's nice, it's horrible.
There are comments there now, Charles.
Our student says the images are more advanced and progressive urban design. There are also some that are mentioning that there are tons of buildings. In fact, the images are dominated by buildings and high density areas.
Yes, good. You have really clever students. So I was expecting such comment. But when we Google again future cities plus climate change, then we have different images. So Here we can see some images with cities, climate change. So here I can imagine here is Sydney. This other picture was from The Guardian, so it's a British journal. So looking at this image of future cities, I don't know if you have seen this image. So this is how Miami's South Beach could look if global heating reached 2 degrees. So we need to think about future cities, how we design future cities, and which approaches we will use for future cities. So how we can shape the future of our cities. So first, we need to look at what are the societal challenges. So we know the first one is population growth, climate change, food security and disaster risk, and then air pollution and health, especially now we are thinking about the coronavirus pandemic. So health is becoming a real issue in our cities. And then climate change is real. The temperature is increasing, so we are expecting an increase in temperatures. And so we need to find an holistic approach to plan and design our future cities. And then looking at the past disasters, so these are the number of impacts of disasters since the 1992 Rio de Janeiro Air Summit. So we can see that 4.4 billion affected, that is equal to the 64% of the world's population. In terms of money, US dollar, 2.0 trillion damage, 1.3 million killed. So we need to consider disasters also for our planning of future cities. This is on this figure, we can see the number of climate-related disasters around the world from 1980 until 2011. We have 3,455 floods, 2,689 storms, 470 droughts, and then here, climate change, extreme temperature, 395. And then another problem is also hunger. So we think that all people, they have access, they have proper nutrition, proper food, but it's not true. So here we can see that in several countries, here undernourishment in the total population. So we are in countries like in Africa where it's very high, but also in Asia we have countries where this percent is moderate, high, or moderately low, like still in China, India, and other countries of Asia, but also in South America. So also we need to think how we can feed the planet, how we can think about population growth and food security. And another problem that we will have in future is the migration from rural to urban. So the majority of people, they will move to cities in future. So we need to think how we can plan our cities. Another problem that we will have in the future will be biodiversity loss. So we need to think how we can incorporate biodiversity into our urban planning and design. And the other problem, as you can see, the population are getting older. So as you can see from here, in 2050, 1/5 of the world's population will be 60 years or older. And what is the problem with the population will get older? The problem is dementia. So that is a public health priority, and it's also very expensive to manage as disease. So also we need to think how we can design plan dementia-friendly cities. And according to the Montreal Declaration, that was issued at the 2017 Montreal World Design Summit, we need to design for all, and we need to deliver a better quality of life for all citizens. Also, we need to consider the Sustainable Development Goals. We have only 10 years to achieve the targets. So the goal number 11 is about sustainable cities and communities. So I don't know if you know about the target 11. So it's important that you read all the targets. So by 2030, so 10 years, we need to ensure access for all the adequate, safe, and affordable housing and basic services, and upgrade slums. By 2030, provide access to safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport system for all, improving road safety, notably by expanding public transport. So here we can see that transport is very important. Sustainable transportation is very important, with special attention to the needs of those in vulnerable situations, women, children, persons with disabilities, and older persons. By 2013, enhance inclusive and sustainable urbanization and capacity for participatory, integrate, and sustainable human settlement planning and management in all countries. So it's not just in Western countries, it's in all countries. And here we can see that we need to strengthen efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural and natural heritage, and we will look at this today. By 2030, significantly reduce the numbers of deaths and the number of people affected, substantially decrease the direct economic losses relative to global gross domestic product caused by disasters, including water-related disaster, with a focus on protecting the poor and the people in vulnerable situations. By 2030, also, we need to reduce the adverse per capita environmental impact of cities, including by paying special attention to air quality and municipal and other waste management. And then this is also related to landscape architecture, because somehow we are in charge for the design of public spaces, green spaces. So it's the access to green and public spaces. So by 2030, but in particular for women, children, older persons, and persons with disabilities. Also, we need to support positive economic, social, and environmental links between urban, peri-urban, and rural areas. Also by 2020, so that means now, I don't know if they achieve this target, increase the number of cities and human settlement adopting and implementing integrated policy and plans toward inclusion, resource efficiency, mitigation and adaptation to climate change, resilience to disasters, and develop and implement in line with the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030. holistic risk management at all levels. So we need already that in all countries, they should implement an holistic disaster risk management at all levels. Support least developed countries, including from financial technical assistance in building sustainable and resilient building, utilizing local materials. So using local materials, not to import materials from other countries. So we need also to reduce CO2 emissions. So as we saw in the goal 11, but also through the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the international community has recognized for the first time the essential role of culture as enabler of development. So we are talking about culture for sustainable cities. So this is an image from the United Nations environment. So here we have the challenges, and here we have the solution. So these are the challenges: the rapid and often unplanned urbanization that increase pressure on the environment, and the solutions seems, easy solution. So we need to promote sound urban planning, sustainable building, low carbon transports, green spaces, and sustainable lifestyles. And again, the challenge is our cities account for up to 80% of energy consumption, as well as 75% of global waste and carbon emissions. So also we need to invest in renewable energy, waste management, sustainable and green infrastructure. So here you can see the word green infrastructure, and as we are landscape architects and we design green infrastructure. Then the other challenge is to do it to the high concentration of people, infrastructure, housing, and economic activities. Cities are particularly vulnerable to climate change and natural disaster. So what we need to do, we need to protect cities, which are important social, cultural, and economic centers from environmental and climate threats. So here we see again the word culture. So according to Irina Bokova, that was the former Director General of UNESCO, quality urban environments are shaped by culture. And as landscape architects, we need to think that well-designed and well-managed public space can also encourage healthy lifestyle, foster public safety, create economic value, and contribute to the environmental aims by promoting walkability and supporting biodiversity. So as Jane Jacobs once said, streets and their sidewalks, the main public place of a city, are its most vital organs. Yet, despite their importance, public spaces are often poorly integrated or neglected in planning and urban development, hampering economic activities, increasing pollution, and reducing social stability and security. So this is very important that also our clients, but also policy makers, they should think that quality urban environments should not be regarded as costly intervention for wealthy countries or cities. When based on cultural approaches, quality urban environments enhance the identity and livability and therefore sustainability of cities for community and individuals. So it's very important that our policymakers, our clients, they understand the value of well-designed urban green spaces And also we have a role in the design of cultural landscape. So according to the German geographer Karl Troll, landscape designs provide the active creation of the cultural landscape, not only to meet its functional requirements, but also to create an harmonic structure in the appearance of the landscape, if not in its artistic design. So what are cultural landscapes? Cultural landscapes represent the combined works of nature and of the man. This is the UNESCO definition. So they are illustrative of the evolution of human society and settlement over time under the influence of the physical constraints and or opportunity presented by the natural environment and of successive social, economic, and cultural forces, both external and internal. And then we have also, it's important to know the terminology when we are dealing with the city. Another term that you need to consider is the urban heritage. That is of the vital importance for our cities now and in the future. Tangible and intangible urban heritage are sources of social cohesion, factors of diversity, and drivers of creativity, innovation, and urban regeneration. Then again, about terminology terms, we have cultural landscape, but in city also we have forest, urban forest. So there is this book that is about the forest and the city, the cultural landscape or urban woodland. So in this book, we can see that the cultural forest landscape, that is a landscape with managed forest as the key element that have been crucial in the development of local and national society. So they've been essential source of timber and fuel wood, but they have also contributed to the shaping of culture and nation identity. So if we are thinking about the city, in the public landscape of city, trees have been used in two main settings. Trees have been used for public activities because the presence of trees enhance such as parade routes, areas for recreation, promenades, streetscape for pedestrian and public spaces. Also, trees have been used as an extension of the private garden and most often as street trees in front of houses. So cultural landscape in urban areas, also they provide ecosystem services. So they provide the benefits to people. So when we are thinking about future cities, we need to consider how we can preserve existing urban woodland, how we can increase the number of urban trees, the number of urban forests, because at the same time, they will reduce pollutants, they will provide cultural ecosystem services. So so there are several approaches that we can use to deal with the design and the planning of future cities. I'm running a program, a module that is called Urban Futures. So it's one semester long module. So today I can just focus on a few approaches. But I want to show you also the resources that you can use for the design and planning of urban futures. So resources are from the UNESCO. For example, there is this publication it's a booklet that was published in 2013, I think, and it's about the new life for historic cities, and it's the historic urban landscape approach explained. So we will also look at this historic urban landscape. So this is one approach that we will focus in the next slides. And also I recommend this book from Francesco Bandarin. I also invited Francesco Bandarin for the summer school that I organized in Russia. That the title was Cultural Landscape and Urban Regeneration. It's a well-written book that is reconnecting the city, the historic urban landscape approach, and the future urban heritage. Also, you should also use to have a look at this report that is the global reports on culture urban future. The global report explores the role of culture for sustainable urban development, and that this was published 4 years ago. So what is the UNESCO approach to managing historic urban landscape? This is an holistic approach by integrating the goals of urban heritage conservation and those of social and economic development. So this approach sees urban heritage as a social, cultural, and economic asset for the development of cities. So this approach moves beyond the preservation of the physical environment and focuses on the entire human environment with all its tangible and intangible qualities. It seeks to increase the sustainability of planning and design intervention by taking into account the existing built environment, intangible heritage, cultural diversity, socioeconomic and environmental factors, along with the local community values. So here you can see that here we have socioeconomic, diversity, and local community values. Also, this approach, the historical urban landscape approach, learns from the traditions. So traditions are very important, and perception of local communities. And also, this approach respects the values of the nation and international communities. So you can look at the global reports. They are case studies from around the world. So because I don't have time to look at all the study, the report is available online. So after my presentation, you can have a look at all the studies that are in this report. So at the best example of sustainable urban development around the world. Then there was published just last year the UNESCO recommendation on the historical urban landscape. As you can see, this was published in 2019. So these are action-oriented recommendations to support sustainable urbanization. The first thing, the general recommendation, and this is also the role of university, and also what we are doing now is promote creativity, research innovation, cultural diversity, and social inclusion, as well integrate management of natural and cultural resources and assets as drivers for sustainable urban development. So here we can see that culture as a driver for sustainable urban development and management needs to be harnessed by protecting and safeguarding the urban historical landscape as well as cultural and natural heritage. So we need to protect our urban historical landscape. Also, we need to boost creativity, research innovation, So this is the role of university. Also, I don't know if you have PhD students, it will be part of your research. For researchers, we need to think that the research has a primary role for the sustainable urban planning, because with our research we can influence policymakers. And as landscape architects, we can boost creativity. So this is a creative profession, is at the same time is art and science, and also we need to that our students, they boost their creativity for sustainable urban planning. Also, another recommendation is to promote integrate local policy for cultural diversity and social inclusion. So nowadays we see about Black Matters. Also, we need to culture and creative industry inter alia by building local capacity in the creation, production, and distribution of cultural goods and services. This is very important, is to mainstream culture into local economic and social development programs and initiatives. We need to promote the concept of creative cities, a powerful means for stimulating creativity, innovation, and imagination, in particular of youth, so children, students, for sustainable urban development. This is when we are thinking about the future of city, we need to include cultural impacts assessment mechanism for urbanization process in order to improve the quality of public spaces, boosting sustainable and responsible cultural tourism. And then this is expanding intercity networking and cooperation, knowledge sharing, and exchange at national and international level. So now with the COVID-19 pandemic, we see that sharing knowledge is very important to deal with this pandemic. So as you can see here, sustainable development and urbanization can all be achieved if individuals and society change the way they think and act. So we need to change the way we think and also we act. And as a profession, as landscape architects, we need to promote sustainable development. So we need also mobilize education for sustainable development as a driver for sustainable urbanization. And then the other problem that we have in cities, water resources. So there is a need for a paradigm shift in how water resources are used and managed in urban areas. So as landscape architects, we are talking about sustainable urban drainage in the UK, low impact development in the USA, now in Australia, water sensitive urban design. In China, they are using this concept about sponge cities. So as you can see, again, we have a primary role for the water management of future cities. And in academia, we need to improve scientific knowledge for sustainable urban water management and the science policy society interface to translate this knowledge into sound policy. So again, with our research, we can influence policymakers. And also we need to shift from water supply management to water demand management. So also in city, we need to take measures to reduce water pollution. Again, as landscape architects, we design rain gardens. We need to consider how we can reduce pollutants in cities, in our water. So phytoremediation has a primary role in removing pollutants. So also we need to think about to create buffer zones to protect urban aquatic ecosystem and habitats. Also, we need to use this ecosystem, so these habitats as tool for flood protection, pollution control, and also to improve the quality of life. We need also to adapt urban water system to climate change. Also, we need to balance technological innovation with low cost and efficient solution. And also, again, here we need the formulation of policies. And also here we can see again the role of landscape architecture is about biosphere reserves are an effective means to promote and enhance cooperation between the cities and the region in which they are located, fostering the harmonious integration of people and nature for sustainable development. So we need to promote sustainable urban futures through UNESCO Biosphere reserves. This is from my publication that I published 2 years ago. 1 second, I need to. So here you can see all the different category of urban green biosphere reserve. So we have category 1 that is here is like a circle. So, and it's called Urban Green Belt Biosphere Reserve. So you have a belt around the city. The second category is the Urban Green Corridor Biosphere Reserve. So here you can see that you have green corridors between the biosphere. The other category is Urban Green Area Clusters. So here you can see that we have clusters. And the last one is the Urban Region Biosphere Reserve. So we need to promote Biosphere Reserve. An example of the Biosphere Reserve is the Dublin Bay Biosphere Reserve. So I visited this place last year and also include these images in my book chapter that was published this year. So this is Dublin Biosphere Reserve grassland. So are very important for the biodiversity. So here you can see important orchids such as the bee orchid and the pyramidale orchid grow in this area. So here you can see, sorry, I need to. So this is the city of Dublin. This is all the Biosphere Reserve. Another good example of a Biosphere Reserve is in this country, is in Brighton. So this is the city of Brighton, and here you can see the Biosphere Reserve. But also in coastal cities, sustainable urbanization requires adaptation strategy and plans to mitigate the impact of sea level rise. So we saw the first image that was about Miami. So we need to think approaches, how we can deal with tsunami. So we need approaches to implement tsunami early warning system. And also, again, education is very important. So we need to educate urban community about the risk. So we need to conduct urban hazard assessment. And also we need to set up integrate urban disaster management strategies. And we need to adopt integrated coastal management and marine spatial planning process to consider the cumulative effect of human activities on the ocean. So before I talk about Brighton, so yes, we need to protect coastal areas. So this is an image of Brighton. And so here you can see the role of research, the role of science that is very important, how we can protect our communities. And where as landscape architects, where we can find information about how we can protect our cities. So there is this the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and there is this book about making cities resilient, and it's asking if your city is ready to future disaster. The other problem is to respond to the increased needs of developing countries, especially in urban areas. The use and application of off-grid renewable energy system, especially solar energy, could prove to be the most appropriate and locally available option for public buildings. So we need to promote energy supply of public buildings through off-grid renewable energy system, especially solar energy. So we saw that from the UNESCO, there are several approaches that we can use for the planning of future cities. So there are other approaches like nature-based solution, like biophilic design, like the biomorphic design, so that I didn't include in my presentation. But we need to consider that cities are dynamic organisms. So there is not a single historic city in the world that has retained its original character. The concept is a moving target destined to change with the society itself. To preserve the urban historic landscape, strategic and dynamic alliance need to be built between various actors in the urban scene, foremost between public authorities that manage the cities and developers and entrepreneurs that operate in the city. So as you can see, the design and planning of future cities is very complex, being the city being an ecosystem. So you need to look at the guideline from, as I showed today, from the UNESCO, guideline also from UN Habitat, but also from research. Unfortunately, as field landscape architecture is not a productive field in terms of research outputs. So if we want a sustainable future, as landscape architects, also we need to increase our research outputs in order to influence policymakers. And with the research through design, we can also test our design solution for future cities. So we need to think which strategies we can implement in our cities, and so we can dream about a better city. I'm not speaking about utopian cities, so I'm talking about to have better cities for all. So as I said about the Montreal Declaration, we need to design city for all, city for the elderly, and also now we have this new challenge that is called that is this virus, the COVID pandemic. And so also we need to consider how we can design city for the post-pandemic. So I think already I finished all my 30 minutes or more. So if you have any question, I will be happy to answer them. So thank you. I hope it was not too boring, this session, too many information. And I hope you can visit me in England at the University of Gloucestershire.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Russo. Uh, so we are now open for question coming from students. You may now type your questions in the chat box so we can read your questions. It was a very informative presentation, Professor Russo, regarding the importance of cultural landscapes. Okay. Okay, so there's a question here. Okay, from Ryan Calandria. Thank you, Dr. Russo, for the amazing talk about cultural landscapes. You mentioned that public cities should use renewable energy sources such as solar energy. Looking at designs with innovative elements such as use of renewable energy, what is your say about countries lacking financial capabilities to incorporate renewable energy sources in their landscape design in cities? So that's the question.
So this is always is the main problem. Is, as I said, we need to influence policymakers. So being in academia, my primary role is to influence policymakers. So if we want to have a better future, if we want to have a better future also in development countries, also the politicians, they should understand the role of renewable energy, that they can be costly for the population, and only with the right policy then we can implement in our cities. So I'm from Italy, so in my country we have policy for renewable energies, and I think also, I don't know how is the situation in the Philippines. So I think if we want to change our future, we need the involvement of politicians. They need to think that climate change is real, that we need to reduce CO2 emissions, and the way to reduce CO2 emission is through renewable energy, so also solar energy. And so I don't know if I answer the question, but I believe we need that policymakers they understand that there is a problem and they need to solve this problem.
Okay, so we're still waiting for some questions from the students. Maybe questions from the YouTube viewers. Let me see. Okay. Okay. So this is from the YouTube. Um, how can green spaces could help people in the city to connect with their culture and heritage?
So as I show in my presentation, there are guidelines from the UNESCO. There is this, as I said, one second. There is this recommendation on the historical urban landscape. And also we need to think about that the city is, we have several layers. So it's the layers of the historical city. So we need to preserve our heritage and also local communities, and how we can also link the communities with our heritage is through tourism, but should be sustainable tourism. But also we need to think about an opportunity for the community because we can create job opportunities. So if we can think about our historical cities, our heritage, we can create job opportunities. The problem is that we need a sustainable tourism. So if I'm thinking Venice in Italy, where I'm from, I'm not from Venice, but or I'm thinking about Florence. So we need a sustainable tourism, not that we have a massive tourism. And this is also our role in research, how we can promote sustainable tourism, and at the same time, how we can connect the community with the heritage, and how we can integrate the community as part of the city and also as part of the sustainable tourism.
Thank you, Dr. Russo. So we have another question from Athea Daiko. If ever the worst case scenario in our future cities occurred, what would we do as landscape architects?
So so we need to design for better cities using the available tools that we have. So I said that we need to incorporate nature into our cities. We need to use, for example, nature-based solutions. We need to think about the city, like in China now, they are talking about sponge cities. We need an holistic approach in our design. We need to think how we can incorporate biodiversity in our cities. So I wrote a book chapter that was published this year, and was about integrating ecology into city design and planning. So as landscape architect, we can integrate ecology, that means nature, in our cities. And so if we integrate nature, that means we will increase ecosystem services.
Yes.
So in terms of climate change, with trees, we can reduce CO2 emissions. With trees and other vegetation also, we can deal with the urban heat island. So we need to have a primary role in the city design planning. It's not just that architects, they will design our cities, but we should be in charge for the design of our future cities, because we are the one that they can enhance ecosystem services. And at the same time, we can protect our cultural heritage.
So we have another question. Do you think that the eco-urban design concept in cities is the next big thing in dealing with climate change?
Eco, I think, is referring to eco-urbanism.
Yes.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm teaching a module that is called Urban Future, and we are looking at the different approaches for dealing with the future city. One of these is about the eco-urbanism. So there is the book of Miguel Ruano about the eco-urbanism, and there are also several examples. So I believe that we need to incorporate different approaches. So as I said, the city is a complex organism. So we can take the good things or the good approaches from the eco-urbanism, but also can also take some good example from the new urbanism or from the landscape urbanism. So nowadays, all the urbanism, there are several approaches, several movements that are dealing with the city. And I think we need to incorporate all these approaches, plus looking at the report from the United Nations, from the UNESCO, and then we can deal with the city. So it's not just, okay, in eco-urbanism, we will solve all our problems in cities.
Thank you, Doctor. Next, we have another question from YouTube. While the recommendations from different international bodies such as UNESCO and IUCN encompass several components, these recommendations tend to be overwhelming. How do we contextualize and localize this recommendation?
Yeah, so the always for our cities, we need to think that the site specific of our city. So the first thing is site specific. So I work in the Middle East, so from the desert, you have a new city. But when we are dealing with an historical city, we need to consider about the local community, the heritage of the city. So and then the most important aspect is the local policy. So if the local policy don't incorporate this recommendation from the International Union for Conservation of Nature or from the UNESCO, then it will be really hard for landscape architects to implement this recommendation. So again, the problem is at the policymakers level. So policymakers should incorporate this recommendation, because these recommendations are not policy, are just recommendation. And then as landscape architects, we can incorporate this recommendation in our city design and planning. So again, this is our role as landscape architects and also as academics is to influence policymakers, and also our role is to inform. So it's good to have conferences, symposium, where we can influence local communities. Because if we don't inform our local community, then it's impossible to inform politicians.
Okay, so we have another question here. What is the rate of preservation of cultural landscape in Europe or in any parts of the world now?
I don't know the figure. This I need to Google, and I don't remember the exact figure, so I cannot answer it.
So what about particularly in England?
Yes, so in England also, where I live, in Cheltenham, we have also reserve areas. So inside the city, we have protected areas. I don't know how it's in the Philippines, but in this country, also we have several organizations that are dealing with the conservation of nature in cities. I'm also part of a network that is called Gloucestershire Green Infrastructure. So it's a network to implement green infrastructure in this part of England, so the Gloucestershire. So yes, there are policy for the protection of protected areas. There are policy for the protection of biodiversity, and also policy to increase biodiversity in cities. So now we have Brexit, but also before, in this country, we had European projects funded by the European Union to increase biodiversity in cities. And all cities in England also have a biodiversity plan. An example is Bristol. Bristol has a biodiversity plan, and also Bristol won the Green Capital Award in 2015 for the city best practice. And one of these is the Bristol Biodiversity Plan.
Okay, Professor, can we request you to stop share your screen so we can see your face? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Hi, Dr. Russo. Regarding the possible future economic downfall, especially to the second and third world countries due to the global pandemic, how we can handle such thing as a landscape architect, and how does the approach may done? Is there a limitation for us to build a sustainable landscape projects because of lacking of allotted budget due to the aftermath of pandemic? Thank you.
So there was in my slide about the former director of UNESCO that was saying that cities should not cut the budget for well-designed urban green spaces. So if we want to deal with the pandemic, if we want to create opportunities, we need to design green spaces. So now I'm thinking about my friend Professor Kim, that he passed away a couple of months ago. Yeah. About his project, in the center of Seoul. So, and there was published just 1 month ago. I read the paper about the linear park in Seoul that came about the economic value of this project. So we, with the design of Professor Kim's project, also he increased the economic value. He create job opportunities. So we need to think about urban regeneration to create opportunities. And also I'm thinking about the project in New York, the High Line. What we need to try to avoid is the gentrification. So this is a problem, and how we can avoid gentrification. So green spaces should be not only for millionaires. As I said, green spaces should be for all. To avoid the gentrification is our role as landscape architects, but also politicians.
Thank you, sir. And then we have another question here. Regarding the protection of cultural historic sites, can you share the amelioration the Italians are doing regarding the flooding or the sinking of Florence due to climate change?
I don't know if we have a good example, because I don't know if you know about this protection in Venice. Is the MOSE, this project is to protect Venice from sea level rise, and every winter there is this increase of. So they tested this barrier in Venice, so you can it's called MOSE. So you can have a look. So we will see if will be a real solution. So it's not a landscape architecture solution, it's an engineeristic solution to create this barrier for the water. But if I'm thinking about landscape architecture projects to protect from climate change, no, I'm not thinking a good project. So now all people, they are thinking about, when we are talking about Italy, they are thinking about the vertical forest in Milan. And again, should we have all our buildings with trees? Is this the best solution for our future cities? This concept of forest cities, and because at the same time we need to think about the maintenance costs and also the CO2 emissions. So for a landscape, for an architect, it's okay to have buildings with trees, but again there is the problem about gentrification, because to buy an apartment at the vertical forest in Milan, you need to be rich, very rich. And also the concept of vertical forest, where is the landscape? So you have a balcony with the trees, so it's in reality it's a green roof.
Yeah.
But where is the landscape? So we need to think that we need to increase green spaces for children. So the solution is not just to have cities with vertical forest. The solution is also to have enough green spaces for all, enough playgrounds. So where I live, Cheltenham, is a good example of a city for children. So unfortunately, maybe next time when I will visit you in the Philippines, I can show you some picture from Cheltenham about the playgrounds and all the parks that we have in this city. So to deal with the climate change, we need to increase the number of parks, the number of tree cover in cities, and also we need to reduce the number of paving areas.
Okay.
Because looking at in Italy, looking at a recent project about plazas. So you see plazas just with one tree, with just pavings, and this is not for our future. So if we are thinking about the urban heat island, we need to think about the albedo of surfaces. We need also to think about permeability of surfaces, and also how we can reduce CO2 emission using vegetation.
So thank you, Professor. So we have another question here. So some government centers, like Canberra and Brasilia, are the government is moving them to less urbanized area. For example, here in the Philippines, we have this project. The government is moving our government center in Clark, the Twin City. Okay, so what is your opinion on that? What are the issues affecting culture and identity in terms of moving these government centers in less urban areas?
So as I understood correctly, this is about moving from the city in urban areas.
Moving, oh yeah, from the city going to less urbanized areas. The city centers.
So depends where you are moving. So if it's a rural area, but if you are, the problem could be about the urban sprawl. So this is the main problem that you can have. So if you are talking about to have a village, okay, a village, okay, people that can live in a village. So we need policy that can create opportunities for people in villages, so we don't have migration from rural to urban. But if we are thinking to create new towns,
Yes.
in rural areas, no, this is not the right solution. So because they will replace agricultural land with buildings, they will replace forest with buildings. So if you are looking at the new urbanist movement, they are trying to avoid the urban sprawl. So now we are talking about compact cities. But the challenge for landscape architects is then to integrate green spaces into the compact cities. So this is a real challenge for us. So I have several students from Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, they have pocket gardens in the compact city. So I don't think that moving the city into the rural area is the solution. It's just a way to destroy our environment. So I think in terms of cultural heritage, of tradition, I think we need to find the right policy that people that can live in villages and they will not move from the village to the city.
Yes. So we have, we will entertain the last question. Okay. A key component in cultural landscapes and heritage conservation is authenticity. With all the global crises such as climate change, biodiversity loss, how do we maintain the authenticity of cultural landscapes in the changing climate?
So we live in a globalized world, and there is also in landscape architecture we see that also projects are globalized, so they are designed by international companies. So you can, it's like when you go to a mall, you will see the same mall in the States, in the UK, in the Philippines, in Dubai. So we have this globalization also in the design, also in the design of urban green spaces. And there is no authenticity. So we are not protecting our heritage. We think that because this was designed by a famous American landscape architect, that means that for us is considered is good. But we need to think about our heritage, about our culture. So consider climate change. Yes, we can incorporate this recommendation from the UNESCO, but the main problem from politicians is to invite these international landscape architects, for example, in the Philippines. So you know about your culture, you know about your heritage, you know what you need to preserve because you know your place. I'm from Italy. I don't know. I don't know about you. I know, okay, about the Philippines, the history of the Philippines. But if I have to design a place in the Philippines, first I need to study the place. Second, I need to talk with the local community. There is a program, I don't know if you know, it's Grand Design. Do you know the program Grand Design? So there was a project with Martha Swartz. You know who is Martha Swartz?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So she didn't consider the local community in her design. So you can be a greatest landscape architect, but you need to consider the heritage of the place and also the local community.
Yes. So we have two more questions. Maybe first, which age group has the most important role to play in achieving a country or city's sustainability? Or are they all equally important?
So we need to, for the sustainability, we need to think all ages. So we don't need to think about just the elderly or the children. So we need to consider all the different ages, and we need to think how we can design the city for all. Also, it's not all about ages, also about disabilities.
Yes.
So it's from the Montreal Declaration. We need to design for a better city for all.
Okay. So this is the last thing. So what would you advise to our young students to engage more in studies and research in cultural landscape? The final question.
Yeah, so as students, so this could be part of your dissertation. If you want to be in academia, also you can start your PhD on cultural landscapes. As I said, we are not a productive discipline. There are also several papers in the States where they said that we are not a productive discipline. So you can give a contribution to this discipline. So we need to have also primary data that then they can influence policymakers. So you students, they will be in charge for the protection of future cities. They will be in charge for the protection and conservation of cultural landscapes in the Philippines. And policymakers, they are just thinking about money. This is the main reason. And from cultural landscape, we receive benefits. The benefit is called ecosystem services. So we need to protect cultural landscape because they provide us with cultural landscape, cultural ecosystem services. So if you are thinking about what could be your topic, could be about cultural ecosystem services of landscapes in the Philippines.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you, Professor Russo, for the insights and in protecting and conservation of this cultural landscape. So we would like to Sir Nori Palarca to do a rapporteur on the lecture conducted by Professor Russo. Sir Nori.
Thank you very much, Madonna. Good evening, Dr. Russo.
Good afternoon. No, good morning. Still good morning.
It's evening here.
Oh, yeah, it's evening here. Well, thank you very much for that very enlightening, frank, and realistic presentation. Even though you are not very familiar with the Philippines, I think you have an idea of how things work here, no? Yeah, because you mentioned about your comments on transferring cities. So it's basically a matter of policy. Anyway, I'm supposed to be the rapporteur, no? So I'll just summarize what you have mentioned. No? Although this is available live, no? On YouTube. Okay, the presentation is about future cities as cultural landscapes. No? And you started with global conditions. So from the data presented from the Rio Summit, you presented the bleak scenario that we have experiencing 1.3 people killed by disasters, past disasters, 4.4 billion affected, 2 trillion damaged. So it's very painted a bleak picture of what we have experienced in the past. And you also mentioned about the issues or the needs that are confronting us, like hunger. How can we feed population, food security, migration, biodiversity loss, aging population, which is a big burden for the countries. Like if you treat dementia, it's a very expensive public health issue. You also talked about Montreal Declaration, which is to improve the quality of life for all. And you also touched upon the strategic development goals of the UN. So we still have 10 years to achieve the development goals, and you focus on the goal number 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. And the goal number 11 sets targets, like for instance, in 2030, there should be inclusive sustainable urbanization, world cultural heritage sites would be focused, universal access to green public spaces, policies, inclusive resource efficiency, mitigation and adaptation to climate change. And you also mentioned about the need to support least developed countries, both financially and technically. And of course, you mentioned about the cultural landscape and urbanization. You also presented the international the report, cultural and heritage, sustainable cities and communities. You presented challenges and solutions, like for instance, unplanned urbanization, which exerts pressure on the environment. And the solution that also mentioned in that is that sustainable buildings, low carbon footprint, green spaces, sustainable lifestyles, all recommendations from that. We also mentioned Miss Irina Bokova, the former UNESCO Director General, and who said that uh, the quality of the urban environment is shaped by its culture, which is a very significant statement. You also mentioned Mr. Karl Troll, German geographer, who said that cultural landscape, the illustrates the evolution of humans, society, and settlements. You also mentioned about cultural forestry landscapes, wherein uh, management, it's crucial in the development of and management of urban forests, cultural forests in the landscape. And then you recommended some materials, new life of historic cities, reconnecting the cities, and the global report on cultural and sustainable urban development. Uh, these are all timely resources, especially for the academy and the students. Uh, you also mentioned about UNESCO's historic urban landscape approach, which is to include socioeconomic diversity and local community values. You also mentioned about the global report on cultural and sustainable development and UNESCO's recommendation on historic urban landscape. You enumerated several recommendations. I'll just mention a few. Promote innovative cultural development. I can't read my handwriting anymore. Culture as diverse for sustainable urban development and management, sustainable development and urbanization achievable by individuals and societies if they will change the way they think. Also, a recommendation on water resource management and manage integrated, participatory, and forward-looking type of development. Also mentioned that academia should improve its scientific knowledge on sustainable urban water management. You also mentioned about biosphere reserves, and you showed us slides of your publication wherein you showed us the 4 categories of biosphere reserves, which is a belt, a corridor, a cluster, and a region. You also mentioned about recommendation on sustainable urbanization in coastal cities. And how are we going to address sea level rise, tsunami, early warning systems, and there's the need to educate coastal communities about the risks and integrate marine information into the development. You also mentioned about respond to increased need of developing countries, especially in the urban areas, on energy and food and so on and so forth. You also recommended for us to look at the UNESCO approach on that cities are is a dynamic organism. It's a moving target. We should preserve urban historic landscape and encourage alliance between actors of development and public authorities, including entrepreneurs and developers in the city. There should be increased landscape architectural research output to influence policymakers and also to influence design. You recommended strategies on how to, which strategy you mentioned, which strategy to implement to improve cities. You stressed on that we should design cities for all, an inclusive design that will include children, PWDs, elderly, the women, the vulnerable groups, and also considering recent developments like the pandemic into the design. You also mentioned that for a better future, we should, as the role of the academe, we should influence policymakers so that we can better come up with better designs of green and public open spaces. That's all I was able to get from your very quick presentation, but it was very comprehensive. I think it was very enlightening, and we have the live your live presentation, so we can review, and it will. I sincerely believe that it will enrich our knowledge, our existing knowledge, especially of those of the students. Thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you for inviting me, and I hope to visit you next year after the COVID pandemic.
Do you have any final words for us, Dr. Alessio?
Final words is for students that we can change the world with our design, and we can improve the well-being of people. So we have an important role as landscape architects for future societies. So work hard now, study hard. Yes. Don't think I don't want to study now. Think that landscape architects, they will have a primary role in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have now Miss AJ Rosell for some closing remarks.
So, once again, thank you very much, Dr. Russo, for imparting your knowledge on future cities as cultural landscape, as well as the hosts and moderators for our fruitful discussion. And we also appreciate the audience for the support. So this ends our 7th webinar hosted by the Environmental Landscapes Studio Laboratory every Tuesday for its landscape architecture students and the public. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.